Hi everyone. Today marks the 100th video that covers roughly the first 90 days of treatment, or since I found out that I have cancer. It's been a journey of highs and lows and of lessons I'll never forget. So today I wanted to cover some key reflections as well as, summarize the journey that I've been on in the last 90 days. So, in terms of reflections, things that I've learned that have changed the way that I look at life. One is prioritizing what really matters most. It's amazing how things just melt away when the amount of time that you're looking at in life gets cut short. It kind of really makes you focus on what really matters, and for me, my values end up being faith, family, health, and service to others. And that's really what I use as a mental model for figuring out what's important for me at any point in time. Like, when my son was taking a bath and I was watching a movie that the picture just didn't look right, that a movie would add any value. So sitting down and then playing with my son, and we both became firemen for about a half hour, just putting out fires in the bathtub. The second one is faith is what keeps me strong and motivated, as well as other things like encouragement from all of y'all. But faith really keeps me strong and grounded. If somebody asks me, what keeps me strong and what keeps me motivated, faith is one of the biggest things, because in a situation like this where I don't necessarily have a lot of control over the situation, other than what I do when I'm not receiving treatment in terms of health and nutrition. At some point I just have to let go and let God take over, or I'll kind of just go crazy and trying to do everything on my own when I just don't have control of the situation. So at some point, really obtaining the peace and joy that I need to continue, faith is what keeps me strong. The third one is routine is very important. Waking up every morning and having things to do, because during recovery, if you're lucky like me, and you don't have to focus on anything other than the recovery or fighting the disease in general, you need to keep up a strong routine. Things like gratitude and prayer in the morning, exercise, meals, taking up a hobby, all those things. It's important to have a routine so that you can stay grounded and continue to go on this journey, because for me, the beginning was very much like a sprint where every day felt like I had something to do. But now that it's settled down and we have a treatment path, it's a bit tougher, because there's a lot more time between treatments, which makes it so that routine becomes even more important, so that I'm not always constantly thinking about the next, what can I do, what else can I do, what else should I be doing, which isn't always helpful. Number 4 is having a conscientious partner makes everything better. My wife definitely is super conscientious and always tries to think ahead for me. She plans everything, the administrative piece of scheduling things, finding maids to be able to help during this time when she is definitely overloaded with watching a child and taking care of me. But she's definitely always thinking ahead about how to make things easier for everybody else, even if it makes it harder for her, which is something we're working on. Number 5, being present is one of the greatest gifts we can give. Playing with my son in the past, I used to have, dozens of things I would be thinking about other than playing with my son. And now, playing with my son and spending time with family, I am definitely much more present and able to really connect with the moment and, my family and the people around me. So, being present in the moment and enjoying the connection is definitely a great gift. Food is medicine. You are what you eat, all those old adages, especially during this point in time. Right now, being able to eat really is important because I need to keep up my strength to be able to continue to fight this disease. Also, at the same time, not going overboard and eating, desserts every day or, a ton of fat or anything like that. Trying to eat a bit healthier to make sure that I can maintain my strength as well as not develop any other problems during this process. Number 7 is it's okay to not be okay. Some days are harder than others, and some days I'll feel down, and it's really easy to slip back into the dark places of how long I have left to live, or why is this happening to me, or those intrusive thoughts that happen when you're sitting there and with nothing to do, and you just your mind starts to wander. But it's a daily and constant battle to not slip into those dark places and to pull yourself out of them when you do get there. Whether it's through CBT or prayer or something, just using a tool to or hobby or anything to pull yourself out of that situation. Number 8, don't ignore your health. Go to the doctor, get checked. You may have dozens of checks or hundreds of checks where you're fine, but for the exceptions or the outliers, that check can be life or death. It could be life-saving. So I encourage everybody, if you're experiencing symptoms, go see your doctor and have a conversation with them. Don't let it be just going in for a check and checking a box. And if your doctor isn't engaging with you and having a discussion and dismissive, find another doctor. I know it's not so easy. Not everybody has a excellent healthcare or medical system, but you gotta fight and be proactive about these things. Number 9 is having family here during that time was one of my greatest blessings. Having my brothers here, my aunt here, and spending time with all of them. I haven't slept in the same room as my brothers in about 30 years. So it was a crazy blessing to be able to do that, as well as get baptized together. And it just was a very healing moment for me, and got to connect more deeply with my family. So that was definitely a blessing for me. And above all, focus on joy. Look for the meaning in your life, I guess. Joy supersedes happiness, although they're definitely related. But happiness is fleeting. It's something where, as we achieve more, as we get what we want, we're no longer happy. But joy is something intrinsic and internal that gives you meaning, that continues to give you joy. It can be faith, where you're just happy about the good news about your religion, or for Christians it's about being saved, and that gives you joy on a daily basis. Not that it'll be every single day you feel the joy, but you see the people that have devoted themselves to faith, that have this joy that permeates the room, and they glow almost. and it's because they focus on the joy aspect of it. But yeah, those are some key reflections from the first 90 days, and talking about the medical journey. In the first 90 days, I had 3 rounds of treatments. Actually, in the first 2 months, one round of full on. I think it was the just chemo, covering everything, because we wanted to make sure that even before the biopsy came back, that we were making some progress. And then once we found out that it was PNET, so neuroendocrine tumors instead of adenocarcinoma, it opened up more targeted treatment. And so a second round of chemo that was FlowFox, that was more targeted, and then now being even more targeted with nuclear therapy, using PRRT, lutetium, to bind to somatostatin receptors on the cancer cells to kill them directly. So it's been a crazy ride to think I was going to live for 6 to 12 months, and now prognosis being 3 to 5 years or longer. Side effects were mild overall. After the first round of treatment, I did have some pretty bad heartburn that made it difficult to sleep. And then after the second round of treatment, had some appetite struggles where my taste buds, I lost taste for a little bit, and gradually losing appetite during that period of time, but much better now. Then doing the RFA, the radio frequency ablation, to use radio waves to burn off the cancer cells, was successful in removing 90% of the primary tumor, which has possibly restored function to my pancreas, which is making it potentially easier to digest these days. The first report card I got of labs that were run was inconclusive, because the CA19-9 cancer markers were actually increased, but liver function actually improved as well. So it was a bit of a mixed result, but the increase in the cancer markers was actually to be expected, because it happens after treatment, from what I understand. But that the fact that the liver function improved was actually a positive sign. Now, the second report card was much better, which showed significant improvement in both cancer markers as well as liver function. The CA19-9 numbers went from over like 2,300 down to only 700, and hopefully that trend continues, because that basically tells us how active the tumors are. And if it goes to 0, it basically means they're basically inactive, and potentially we can move on to other treatments to go down a curative path potentially. So now the plan is to just stick with the nuclear therapy as well as the somatostatin analogs to control the tumors, and with the next treatment being on September 16th, and the next report card being a month after. So first 90 days have definitely taught me a lot, and a lot around perspective, patience, and being present. I really don't know what the future holds, but I know that I'm gonna continue to fight every day, and that I am confident that I will beat this. But yeah, reflections from the first 90 days, as well as a summary of what happened. It's definitely been a crazy ride, and I'll continue to fight every day to make sure that I'm here for my family, for my friends, and I'll continue telling my story to be able to help as many people as possible. So yeah, still fighting hard every day. Thank you very much for all of the comments and words of encouragement. They really do make a big difference. Thank y'all very much for coming along the journey with me for the first 90 days, and all the ups and downs that ensued. I really appreciate it, and I will talk to y'all later. Bye.